There is a promise built into Los Angeles that the fire stays in the hills. You see the smoke on the ridgeline some autumn afternoon, you check an app, and you go back to your life because the fire has always stayed on its side of the line. On the morning of January 7th, 2025, 4 million people woke up believing that promise. By midnight, it was ash. Today we're telling the full story of the Los Angeles firestorm. 2 fires born hours apart on opposite ends of the county that killed 31 people, destroyed more than 16,000 structures, and became the most destructive disaster in the city's history. Not just what happened, but why it happened. The empty reservoir, the winds that grounded the aircraft, the fire that had been burning underground for a week without anyone knowing, and the neighborhoods that got their evacuation orders after the flames had already arrived. Before we start, if you're the kind of person who wants to understand how a modern American city can lose 2 entire communities in a single night, take a second to subscribe. It genuinely helps the channel. And I want to know one thing while you're here. Where were you on January 7th, 2025, when you first saw the footage? Drop it in the comments. Let's get into it. The setup. Every disaster has a setup, and this one took 2 years to build. In the winters of 2023 and 2024, Southern California got hammered with rain, atmospheric rivers, back to back. The hills around Los Angeles exploded with growth, grass and brush climbing every slope from Malibu to the San Gabriels, green and thick and taller than it had been in years. And then the rain simply stopped. From May of 2024 into January of 2025, downtown Los Angeles received almost nothing. 8 months. The wettest fuel crop in recent memory, cured in place, standing dead on every hillside in the county, waiting. All it needed was wind. And in the first week of January, the forecasts started using language that meteorologists almost never use. The National Weather Service warned of a life-threatening, destructive windstorm, a Santa Ana event unlike the routine ones, winds out of the northeast, dry as bone, forecast to gust near 90 miles per hour, and in the mountains, beyond it. Here is what most people outside California never understood about that warning. It wasn't just that wind spreads fire. It's that wind at that speed takes away the single greatest weapon Los Angeles has: the aircraft. The super scoopers, the water-dropping helicopters, the tankers. Above a certain wind speed, they cannot fly. Which meant that if anything ignited on January 7th, it would burn for hours against ground crews alone. 2 things ignited. The first fire. At around 10:30 in the morning, smoke rose from the hills above Pacific Palisades near a hiking spot called Skull Rock. Within minutes, it was a wall. Within an hour, it was in the neighborhoods. The Palisades fire did not behave like a wildfire. It behaved like a blowtorch laid against a city. Embers flew ahead of the flame front on gusts of 80 to 90 miles per hour, landing on roofs a half-mile ahead, starting new fires that merged with the old one. Residents fleeing down Palisades Drive and Sunset Boulevard hit total gridlock. And when the flames closed in on the stopped traffic, people abandoned their cars in the road and ran on foot toward the ocean. Bulldozers had to shove the empty vehicles aside to clear a path for fire engines. And then, that night, came the detail that turned a disaster into a scandal. The hydrants started going dry. The Upper Palisades is fed by 3 storage tanks holding 1 million gallons each. Demand on the system that day ran at 4 times normal for 15 hours straight, and one by one, all 3 tanks emptied faster than they could refill. Firefighters stood in front of burning homes holding hoses with no pressure. And looming above the neighborhood the whole time was the Santa Ynez Reservoir, a basin built in the 1970s specifically to protect Pacific Palisades, capable of holding 117 million gallons. It was empty. It had been empty for nearly a year, drained for repairs to a torn cover, on the one day in its history it was needed most. State investigators would later conclude that even a full reservoir could not have saved the neighborhood, that no urban water system is built to fight a fire that takes an entire community at once. That may be true. It did not make the image of dry hydrants in a burning city any easier for anyone to accept. The second fire. While the Palisades burned toward the sea 30 miles east, at around 6:15 in the evening, a second fire ignited at the base of Eaton Canyon in the foothills above Altadena, near Southern California Edison transmission lines that would soon become the center of investigations and a wave of lawsuits. If the Palisades fire was fast, the Eaton fire was merciless. The same windstorm was now at full strength, and it drove the flames not away from town, but down into it. Altadena is not a celebrity enclave. It is an old, unincorporated community at the base of the San Gabriels, generations deep, and historically one of the most significant communities of Black homeownership in Southern California, families who bought in the 1960s and the 1970s and passed the houses down. The fire came for all of it in the dark. And here is the part of this story that should stay with you longest. The fire started on the east side of Altadena. Evacuation orders went out there within hours. But on the west side of town, across Lake Avenue, official evacuation orders did not come until hours later, deep into the night, when for many streets the fire was no longer coming. It was there. Nearly every person who died in the Eaton fire died in West Altadena. Some were found in their homes. One man was found outside his house, still holding a garden hose. A county-commissioned review would later point to outdated systems, staffing shortages, and communication failures that delayed the alerts. For the families of the dead, the finding arrived a year too late. By morning, whole square miles of Altadena were simply gone, not damaged, gone. Churches, schools, the businesses along Lake and Mariposa, block after block reduced to chimneys and ash. The numbers. The two fires burned for most of January before full containment on the 31st. When the counting was finally finished, the totals were unlike anything in Los Angeles history. The Palisades fire, 23,448 acres, 6,837 structures destroyed, 12 people killed. The Eaton fire, 14,021 acres, 9,414 structures destroyed, and the greater share of the dead. Together, 31 lives, 16,246 structures, some 59 square miles of Los Angeles County burned, and economic loss estimates that ran into the hundreds of billions of dollars, placing the Firestorm among the costliest disasters in American history. Two of the most destructive fires California had ever recorded on the same day, in the same county, in January, a month that was never supposed to be fire season at all. The cause. And then there was the question everyone was asking. How did the Palisades fire start on a windy morning with no lightning and no power lines at the ignition point? The answer investigators landed on is one of the strangest in the history of American wildfire. The Palisades fire, they concluded, was not new. It was a ghost. On New Year's Day, 6 days earlier, a small blaze called the Lockman Fire had burned 8 acres on that same hillside. Crews knocked it down and went home. But federal investigators allege it never truly died. It smoldered underground, in roots and buried vegetation, invisible for a week, until the morning of January 7th, when hurricane-force winds reached down into the earth and pulled it back out. In October 2025, federal agents arrested a 29-year-old former Uber driver named Jonathan Rinderknecht, alleging he deliberately set that New Year's fire after finishing his shift, then called 911 himself to report it. He pleaded not guilty. His first trial ended with a deadlocked jury, and prosecutors have vowed to try him again. The Eaton fire investigation, meanwhile, zeroed in on Edison's equipment in the canyon, with the utility facing a mountain of litigation from a community that lost everything. One fire allegedly born from a single lighter on a hiking trail, the other from the grid itself, both waiting for the same wind. What's left? A year after the fires, roughly 70% of the displaced residents of Pacific Palisades and Altadena still had not come home. Some are rebuilding. Many are fighting insurance companies. Some sold the land their family held for 3 generations because the math of starting over simply did not work. So here is what this story is really about. Not one bad day. It is about the gap between the city Los Angeles believed it was living in and the one it actually occupies. A city that let a firefighting reservoir sit empty for a year. A county whose alert systems could not outrun a wind-driven flame front. 4 million people living against mountains, loaded with 2 years of dried fuel, trusting a line between the wild and the city that was never really there. The hills above Los Angeles are green again now. The rains came back the way they always do, and the brush is growing on the same slopes above the same neighborhoods, in the same canyons where the wind funnels down from the desert every winter. The promise has quietly been rebuilt, the same as the houses, that the fire stays in the hills, that it cannot happen here, that it cannot happen again. January 7th, 2025 is the answer to that. It already did.